Okay, so this video we're going to look at pseudocode. So remember, pseudocode is an informal way of coding. So here are some key actions that are performed and the common terms used in pseudocode. So inputting information or data into your program, you're going to use the input function or command or the read command. So for our pseudocode, we're going to use input. For outputting data, we're going to use print. So for calculations, if you're trying to get the total, the sum of some numbers, the average of numbers, times the numbers together, you're going to use your plus, minus, times, so the asterisk is times, and slash for divide symbols. And you're going to use comparison symbols as well, so like less than or greater than. So these are some of the basic commands and symbols that you're going to use in pseudocode. So an example of how you can assign values to a variable. So remember, a variable, like a variable x, it's kind of like a placeholder. It can store information. So if you want to make the variable x become 42 or equal to 42, you'd write x, and then this arrow, which pretty much is saying 42 is going into this variable. So x equals 42. That's how we write it in terms of pseudocode. So instead of an equals sign, it's an arrow to the left towards the variable you're storing this value under. So this means that x is now 42, i.e., or in other words, x is 42. Okay, so here's an example. So let x be the sum of w, y, and z. So you can store sums under variables as well. So for example, if you have a variable w, variable y, and a variable z, you can say x is equal to, or in other words, this little left arrow, the sum of w, y, and z. So w plus y plus z, this is the total or the sum of these three variables. So therefore, if w is 10, y is 20, and z is 5, so w 10, y 20, z is 5, this means that x is equal to 10 plus 20 plus 5, which is 35. So that's an example of where your variable can be equal to some formula, for example, the sum of different variables. So example of a calculation. So calculate the product of any two numbers. So this is just the general idea that you'll have in mind for your pseudocode. So the first thing you want to do is we need to input the two numbers that you want to multiply together. So we may use variables to store these numbers. And remember, in variables you can use any names, x, y, z, num1, num2, num3, so it's up to you. The program does the calculation, and then the program outputs the answer. So to output, we're going to use the print command. To input two numbers, we're going to use the input command. So here's an example of this program. So you're going to input the two numbers into your program. So here we have variables x and y. So what input does is it's going to allow the user to type two numbers in. So for example, they might type in 1 and hit enter. That number will be stored under x. And then if they type in like 3 and hit enter, that number will then be stored under y. So the program will then have x and y. And then to times these two values together, we can use another variable z. So we can say z is equal to the two numbers times together, and then we just print, or in other words display, the value for z back to the user. So input x and y, it says you input two numbers, one is stored under x and the other under y. Z, left arrow x asterisk y, multiplies the two numbers together and stores the result under z. And then print z outputs the answer z back to the user on the screen that they're using. So you can use any names for variables. So this is just an alternate form of the previous code. So instead of saying input x and y, you can say input first number, second number. Guess as long as your variables have appropriate names. Then answer is a variable that you can then store the product of these two values under. And then you just print answer just like we printed z on the previous slide. So printing or outputting a statement. Okay, this is the same program as on the previous slides. You input your x and your y. Z is then the two values being multiplied together. So instead of just saying print Z, where Z is just a number, so for example, if X is 2 and Y is 10, Z would be equal to 2 times 10, which is 20. If you just said print Z, it would just display 20 back to the user without any context. But if you want to display a statement as well with the number, to give it some context, you can say the answer is, and then this text will be displayed to the user. This comma is just going to connect these two text values together, and it's going to display 20, for example, or whatever value Z is. So the user types in 2 for X and 10 for Y, Z will be 20, and then what will be displayed back to the user is the answer is 20. So if X is 42 and Y is 36, then print Z would just display 1512 times these two values together. And print the answer is, comma Z would display the answer is 1512. So that's just the difference between saying print Z and saying print the answer is, comma Z. That's how they will be displayed.